Good day, I'm junior researcher Adam Southgate, and today's lecture will be covering the Abrahamic spheres Tynged. I'd appreciate that all hunters please subscribe, as to not miss any future lectures, and also if you enjoy the lecture and find it informative, please like the video and click the bell to ensure you do not miss any future announcements. I would also be very happy to hear your thoughts, views, and stories of your own interactions with the monsters of the spheres in the comment area of this video. Also, I'm always ready to answer any questions you may have, and please share these lectures with any hunters you feel would benefit from them. So, to begin, as always, we'll start with our general announcements. Firstly, I'd like to thank hunters Dan Carrington, along with his Canadian team, and freelance hunter, The Slumbering Sanctuary. Hunter Dan Carrington and his team moved in against one of the Morganian Conclave holdouts within Anglesey. The Conclave members had attempted to create a camp within an old woodland where they could lay low until our god was dropped sufficiently so that they could flee to Avalon. Striking fast, Dan himself took out the true Fae with a well-placed cold iron slug. Of the 3 hybrids, 2 were taken out via weapons fire, while 1 was incapacitated and captured. Of the 7 Conclave hunters, 3 were captured alive, the rest being taken down. These captured individuals have been secured and taken to isolation chambers beneath different Order offices for interrogation and study. Hunter the Slumbering Sanctuary has agreed to aid us in the questioning of these individuals, in exchange for testing into his own true nature. Secondly, we would like to conduct a general survey of our hunters due to a recent affliction that seems to be occurring within our personnel and, more worryingly, within the general population. Tentatively named plate skin, sufferers have been experiencing dry, plate-like structures forming across different parts of their skin, typically in around 5 cm squared areas. While there is no discomfort caused by the ailment, it is worrying due to its anomalous nature. There does not appear to be any transmission vector, it simply appears on a person at random, and more worryingly, it only appears to affect those with a Welsh ancestry. To the end of figuring out what exactly is happening, we will be placing a poll which hunters are free to answer anonymously. The goal is to ascertain how many are affected against how many are unaffected. This will then be cross-referenced with our collected information from the NHS database to see if the affliction is affecting hunters more than the civilian population. Our hope is to see if perhaps interactions with a specific entity or a group of entities from a specific sphere is the cause. After that, we can go from there. I do hope you all participate in this polling, as it will help us with our investigation. To begin today, we must first tackle the idea of fate. There are entities that perceive the future, however, simply by doing so, they in fact change the future, rendering their predictions meaningless. We know that each of the spheres are cyclical in nature, meaning that they begin, play out to an end point, and then begin again. The basic idea is that if you threw 100 dice and recorded the result, and then picked up all of those dice and threw them again, but with every single variable being exactly the same as the first throw, you would always get the same result as the first throw. It can be a bit confusing, but if the beginning is always exactly the same, then so too will the end. This is muddied, however, due to 2 points. Firstly, the fact that spheres that are old enough begin to collapse, shrinking into subspheres, which drastically affects a series of events that transpires within those spheres due to the starting parameters changing. Secondly, the interactions between spheres. Each sphere should be a closed system, however this is not the case, with spheres regularly swapping entities back and forth. This swapping adds new variables to the cycles, throwing them wildly off course over time. Each entity or anomaly is literally pulling us further and further away from our natural cycle. However, even with all of this, there are entities that appear to possess the ability to not only predict the future and have those events play out exactly how they predicted, but also control it in some small way. This is impossible, at least by our understanding of things, as it would involve being able to account for not only every variable within our own universe, but also every other sphere attached to ours, and every other attached to them into infinity. And yet, there are entities that can and do this, though they are extremely rare. Beings that possess this ability are excessively enigmatic in nature, but some appear to, in some way, possess a goal. The Tynged is an Abrahamic entity that was only discovered very recently. However, their effects have been felt for some time. Though there have been very few of them, there has been people that throughout history have been noted as being practically unkillable. People who should have died 1,000 times over, but for some unknown reason, usually attributed to luck or incredible skill, have survived despite the odds, only then to perish in some unforeseen and innocuous way. Many of these people have been inhabited by a Tynged. As stated earlier, we've known about the effects of this entity for some time. However, only recently has the entity itself been identified thanks to the work of the Sanctus Clypeus and the Angelus Pluma. Varying wildly in appearance, though with wings and many eyes always present, a Tynged attaches itself to an unborn person, and from that point on has marked them for an unconventional life. Specifically, those with a Tynged attached to them cannot come to any real harm. In most cases, this shows as the individual always being elsewhere when danger comes, but if the individual directly puts themselves into dangerous situations, it's as if the universe conspires to protect them. One man who, after deliberately jumping from the top of a building that was under construction, fell only one floor before being caught within a tangle of thick wiring that was being lowered just at the right time. The man, instead of falling to his inevitable death, was swung back into the building and was safely deposited only 2 stories down from where he initially jumped, with no injuries. In another incident, a woman who had deliberately weighted her body and leapt into the sea found herself surprised when only a minute after her plunge a cargo container fell from a ship and landed atop her with the doors open and a pocket of air inside. She and the cargo container were shortly recovered, and again she was completely unharmed. The effects seemed to go far beyond incredible escapes from danger, as those with a Tynged appeared to simply drift through life, never facing the slightest adversity. The universe itself appears to conspire to provide for them, as they are given food, shelter, and even money whenever they need it. This supernatural defense against any hardship is not infinite, however, and instead is only in aid of getting the individual to a specific place and time, where they will inevitably die. This point can be decades or even a century after their birth, but is unavoidable, and each with a Tynged know where, when, and how it will happen from the moment they're born. This reality of a living image of their own death eats away at their psyche. While of course they have to live with the dilemma of what is joy if you've never experienced hardship, the thing that is most heavy for them is, again, knowing exactly how and when they will end, which is something the human mind is not truly capable of processing. While you may argue that we all, or more specifically a terminally ill person or a death row inmate, knows that they will die and may even know when they will die, they are saved by cognitive dissonance and the idea that no matter how small, something will save them. those with a Tynged have no doubt about their end, and thus no protection from it. Now, it would be fair to say that if you knew the time and place of your end, you could simply avoid it. However, something always happens to force the individual to the location. As an example, one individual literally emigrated to the opposite side of the world to avoid their location. However, they found that due to an error in a system that their visa was rejected and they were deported back. Once back, they were called to the local tax office to sort out paperwork. The building had moved during the years they were away, and now stood at the location the person was fated to die. After refusing to go and time running short, the individual was escorted to the office by officials, where they then met their end due to the brickwork of the new building crumbling and falling onto them. Due to this event, building regulations were tightened, preventing future incidents. This is perhaps the strangest aspect of the Tynged's actions, that they always appear to lead to some kind of positive end. This does imply some kind of intent behind the actions taken by the Tynged, however, this may simply be coincidental. We have not witnessed any direct communication between a Tynged and the person they inhabit, nor do they seem to respond to any hostile act done to them with the Angelus Pluma. Through testing with the Angelus Pluma, we know that the Tynged can be killed. However, the individual it was inhabiting still possesses their charmed life up until they die in their fated way. This suggests that the Tynged is not actually doing anything other than observing after the point when it first inhabits the individual and shows them where and when they will die. One theory that has been put forward is that these individuals were always going to live the same life, whether the Tynged was present or not, that the Tynged literally does nothing and only observes. However, this is not an idea I subscribe to. This theory only works if the individuals would have always known how they would die, which is something human beings are obviously not capable of. The more prevailing theory is that the Tynged chooses a person that, by only seeing an image of a possible death, puts them on a path to that death. So they only make one change in the path of an individual's life, and due to them knowing how any future would play out, they are able to guarantee the specific future they want with just the one action. Much of this speculation implies intentionality within the Tynged. However, the Sanctus Clepius believes that they are simply agents of a god entity within the Abrahamic sphere. If this is in fact true, then the god entity would be the most powerful that we have yet documented from any of the spheres, able to factor all variables within every single sphere simultaneously. Thankfully for us, fully formed god entities are not able to pass between the spheres directly. However, they are able to exert their will, like in this case with the Tynged. The worrying aspect to this is the idea that this unknown god being is attempting to shape our sphere through the use of the Tynged, and so far we have no way of preventing its changes. So, as hunters, how can you deal with this? Well, the short answer is you can't. But there is an advantage to this that we can exploit. While people inhabited by a Tynged are extremely rare, being 1 in 2 million, their ability to avoid harm makes them extremely valuable. To this end, the Order has endeavored to recruit individuals with a Tynged as hunters, as due to their extreme levels of luck, they are unkillable, and can, after sufficient training, become extremely efficient fighters. This does require a more diplomatic approach on the part of hunters attempting to recruit these individuals, as if they do not wish to go with you, there is no way to make them. However, if you are able to impress upon them the good they could do as hunters, or even the novelty of the job, depending on the individual's temperament, you could gain the Order an extremely useful asset. The Order at current only has one hunter with a Tynged in its employ, and his time is quickly running short, with only 3 years left before his fated demise. We will be doing all we can to attempt to stop it from coming to pass. However, every time any other organization has tried in the past, it has always ended in failure. We were going to use the perpetual tear in Snowdonia National Park to see if by leaving the sphere altogether it could break the destiny line. However, as you may know, we have lost control of the other side of the tear. Lastly, as hunters, there is a downside to those with a Tynged, which is that of their mental health. As the time of their end grows closer, they are taken over with a strong feeling of apathy for themselves and those around them, meaning that they often end up hunting alone. Fate is a strange concept in general, and one that I feel is antithetical to the human experience. We all feel on some level that our actions have consequences, and that by expressing our agency, we give our lives meaning. However, if fate is true, then we are stripped of all agency. We are reduced to introspective cartoon characters, able to think on our actions and even justify them to ourselves, but not actually control them. It would also mean that any ill that anyone causes is not actually their fault, as they were always going to do it and have no choice in it. Personally, I choose to reject this idea, not because it's not the truth, but because without choice, all becomes meaningless. But that will be all for today, with Arthur's might and Merlin's wisdom. Thank you.